Morgan Elizabeth Johnson, 20 years old, unmarried with no children, and a product of the foster care system, was the topic of conversation for Anna Maxwell, the head of the HR department. Anna held a resume in her hand, occasionally glancing at the young woman sitting across from her. "So young, and you've decided to apply for such a position?" Anna asked, looking over the sheet of paper. Morgan just modestly shrugged her shoulders, her gaze lowered. She hadn't been mute from birth, but a horrific accident she had miraculously survived years ago rendered her unable to speak a word. "Ah yes, the car accident that claimed your parents' lives. My condolences, a real tragedy," Anna sighed. As she mentioned the accident, Morgan flinched, fragmented memories flashing before her eyes. "Mommy, Mommy," her mother cried out, embracing the little girl. "Don't be scared. It's just..." Her father's voice came from the driver's seat, before a terrible crash jolted the car. Little Morgan, painfully hitting her shoulder on something, screamed for her mother as the world spun and glass and metal flew. Her father, not wearing a seatbelt, was thrown through the windshield onto the road. Morgan opened her mouth to call for help, but no sound emerged, not a word, not even a gasp. It seemed the trauma had robbed her of her ability to speak. It was dark, cold, and terrifying. She shook her mother's shoulder. But her hand just lifelessly fell beside her. "A childhood trauma, then?" Anna asked, bringing Morgan back to reality. Morgan fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a cardboard sign with the word "yes," then another sign reading, "I cannot speak, but I understand everything you say." Anna shook her head sympathetically. "Poor girl," she murmured, feeling genuinely sorry for Morgan. Morgan nodded, her shoulders drooping. Immediately after the accident, she was taken to the hospital, and then Child Services transferred her to a boarding school. They even tried to help her with a psychologist, who made a half-hearted attempt at therapy sessions. The psychologist shrugged helplessly, acknowledging his failure and her severe post-traumatic stress. Morgan had become withdrawn and unresponsive. Whether she would ever speak again was uncertain. "So, you've got good grades, but no higher education. It's a shame. You're smart but might end up as a janitor," Anna remarked with a shake of her head. Morgan just shrugged, she had left the boarding school mute. Despite her academic success, she couldn't enroll anywhere. Who would want a mute orphan? Morgan sighed heavily, understandingly nodding her head. It wasn't the first interview that had ended in rejection. Some had even thrown her out upon learning of her condition. Anna finished her thought, "I feel sorry for you. Let's do this, a 3-month probationary period. If you manage, we'll formalize it as a program for social integration and assistance for people with special needs." Morgan smiled faintly and showed a card with "Thank you" written on it. A glimmer of hope sparked in her heart. This office was the first place that hadn't rejected her, and Anna was the first person in many months to show compassion. "The salary is small, but the duties are simple. As a janitor, you don't need to talk, but the floors must always be clean. Can you handle it?" Anna stated. Morgan joyously nodded and showed her "yes" sign. Feeling hopeful for the first time in her long, forced silence. Although being a janitor wasn't prestigious, it was honest, paid work. Maybe now, things would start to look up, Morgan thought timidly. Maybe here, she could start a new life, but the miracle she hoped for didn't happen. Weeks since the interview passed, and Morgan worked hard, trying not to draw attention to herself. But the office staff, always craving gossip and spectacle, were unkind. Why are people so cruel? Morgan thought sadly, passing by a group of managers who immediately started giggling and pointing at her. On her first day, every staff member had come to gawk at her as if she were an exotic animal. "This new kind of servant won't talk back," one of the managers had joked crudely. Morgan tried not to notice the blatant mockery. She was resilient, but her heart ached, yearning just to be left alone. "She's probably sleeping with one of the bosses. They hired a mute on purpose so she can't tell his wife," whispered the female secretaries. These jibes were also hurtful because they were completely undeserved. The female staff was even crueler than the male, perhaps because, despite her condition, Morgan was quite attractive, which bred undue envy among her colleagues. "Here comes our queen," sneered one of the security guards, distracting Morgan from her sad thoughts. "Tell me about it," his partner agreed. "Look at our silent lady, not talkative but quite a sight." The security guards laughed smugly as they often leered at Morgan's figure. None of them ever offered help or showed basic human compassion, so Morgan hurried past them, not wanting to stay near these brutes any longer than necessary. Feeling their unpleasant attention, Morgan pressed the elevator button to her floor. Suddenly, a rough voice from one of the managers echoed, "What's up with the mute one? Maybe she's deaf too." "Ignoring me like that," the manager grumbled, pushing Morgan on the shoulder, causing her to stumble and crash into the elevator wall. She exhaled painfully, hitting one of the handrails. Her cardboard communication cards scattered from her pocket. "What's this?" sneered the manager, picking up the white rectangles. Morgan tried to collect them, but he pushed her away. "Thank you, I cannot speak but I understand everything you say." "What, are you a prompter?" he laughed, showing the other employees the collected cards. Morgan cowered in a corner, her legs tucked under her, hurt and terrified by the undeserved barrage of mockery. "What did I ever do to them?" she thought bitterly, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "Look at this," the brute pointed at Morgan, snatching her cards. "We're just joking." With these words, he tossed Morgan's cards aside, causing a paper rain to fall on her. "What did I do to deserve this?" Morgan wondered, feeling a heavy pain spread through her soul, each cell filled with bitter sorrow. The elevator felt like a vile prison, each day bringing only suffering. The managers continued laughing, taking pleasure in her tears. Morgan felt trapped in her silence, unable to respond or seek help. "Why are you causing such a fuss?" a harsh voice said above Morgan. "Want me to be your protector? You'll have to work for it," the voice taunted, a new wave of laughter echoing. Morgan's heart sank under this cruel treatment, her eyes brimming with silent despair. "Leave the girl alone, Max," suddenly said a young man in glasses, Yaroslav, his voice cutting through the taunts. The managers turned their mockery towards Yaroslav. "What, the nerd wants to be a knight in shining armor?" Max teased. "Our gray mouse trying to protect the mute girl," the managers laughed sycophantically. "Is her condition contagious?" Max continued, "Are you losing your voice too, Yaroslav?" Yaroslav stepped back, trapped by the elevator's cold wall. His attempt to retreat only made them laugh harder. "Can't express your own opinion?" Max threatened. Yaroslav felt the sting of his own imperfections, which set him apart from these men. Yet, deep down, he still wanted to protect Morgan. "Laugh at me all you want," Yaroslav whispered, "but leave the girl alone." Morgan looked at him with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was grateful for his defense, on the other, she knew this innocent young man would now become an outcast, just like her. The bullies like Max despised such defiance, and Morgan braced herself for what was to come, swearing to himself that the manager would never forget Yaroslav's attempt at defense. Max taunted, "What's the matter, defender? Got nothing to say?" Yaroslav, struggling for breath, looked away as the tension in the elevator became palpable. The mockers behind Max giggled, while Yaroslav just clenched his teeth, silently enduring their jabs. As the elevator doors opened, Max sneered, "We'll talk later, weirdo," and walked out, followed by others casting meaningful glances at the remaining duo. "We're outcasts now," Morgan thought sadly, picking up her cards from the floor. "Don't mind them. They're just idiots," Yaroslav said, his voice trembling as he knelt to help her collect the scattered cards. Despite everything, Morgan was grateful to him. She had never met someone who stood up for her against a group of bullies, especially those more powerful and higher in status than him. Morgan gently touched Yaroslav's shoulder and showed him a "thank you" card from her palm. Weeks passed since their encounter in that fateful elevator. Yaroslav and Morgan's lives intertwined, spending more time together, and their mutual sympathy blossomed into a romantic relationship. I don't understand why they pick on you, Yaroslav said, handing Morgan a cup of coffee. You're so kind. Gentle, and peace-loving. Can people really not stand someone slightly different from them? Morgan wondered, then smiled and shrugged. Her heart fluttered around Yaroslav, finding in him a protector, a companion whose presence helped her maintain her inner light. Their bond grew stronger with each day, weaving their hearts together with tender threads of attachment. Morgan reached into her pocket, but instead of a usual card, she pulled out a small notebook. You didn't have to defend me back then. Why did you decide to do it? She wrote and showed the page to Yaroslav. I just couldn't stand by and watch you being humiliated and bullied. You're special, and no one deserves the kind of hurt they inflict on you every day. Now you're an outcast too, Morgan wrote, sighing sadly. Believe me, I have no regrets, Yaroslav said, embracing her. Since I met you in that elevator, I realized you're the light in my darkness, my inspiration. Morgan blushed at his words, feeling truly happy for the first time. Look at them cooing, laughed a manager, as they coincidentally ended up in the same corridor. What's up, guy? Decided to stick with our voiceless girl, a security guard asked sarcastically, planning to share this sweet couple story with everyone. Leave us alone, Yaroslav frowned. Oh, getting fierce, are we? Retorted the guard, approaching Yaroslav and grabbing his collar, forcing him to bow his head. Playing the noble hero, huh? The guard sneered. Enough, someone's coming, the other guard interrupted. All right, live for now, you poor things, they said mockingly, leaving. Are you okay? Morgan wrote, looking at Yaroslav worriedly. Just my pride is hurt, he smiled, straightening his shirt collar. How about you come over to my place tonight? We can talk without hiding in corners. Morgan frowned doubtfully, then wrote in her notebook, Are you sure it's okay? I know your mom is sick. Don't worry, she could use some company. I'll wait for you after work and show you where we live. Morgan smiled shyly and nodded. Her heart skipped a beat. Instead of words, she hugged Yaroslav tightly, feeling the warmth of his body merge with hers. Over these days, Morgan and Yaroslav developed their unique way of communicating, understood only by them. For the first time, Morgan couldn't wait for the workday to end, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation for the meeting with Yaroslav. Stepping into his home meant opening the very soul of a person to her, gaining his complete and unconditional trust. Here you are, Yaroslav greeted joyfully, seeing Morgan at the office door. She ran up to him, hugged him, and pecked his cheek. They quickly reached his home and climbed to his apartment. Yaroslav fumbled with the keys, then opened the creaky door covered in dark faux leather. Welcome to our humble abode. Don't judge too harshly, he said, leading her inside. Morgan squeezed his hand and looked around the small entryway. It was a modest place, showing signs of a family living modestly, barely making ends meet. Don't mind the old stuff. It has soul and history, Yaroslav smiled, slightly embarrassed by Morgan's attention to his home. I dream of renovating everything one day. But there are more important things right now. All my savings go to my mom's medicine. I love her and would do anything for her to get better. Yarek, we have guests, a woman's voice came from the room. Yes, Mom, I wanted you to meet Morgan, he replied, slightly nervous. Light steps sounded, and a tall, slender woman emerged, looking unwell. Morgan tried to smile politely, but her gaze was filled with compassion. Yaroslav's mother indeed looked sickly, her cheeks hollowed, her arms and legs thin. Through Angelika Viktorovna's translucent porcelain-like skin, blue veins with injection marks from numerous drips were visible. My name is Angelika Viktorovna, she smiled weakly. Come, let's sit in the kitchen. Morgan nodded agreeably. Despite its simplicity, the kitchen was clean and filled with pleasant aromas. Yarek, take care of the guest, make some tea for Morgan, Angelika smiled, looking dreamily out the window at the fading sunlight. How she longs to go out in these four walls, she mused. Is everything all right at work? Angelika asked. Yaroslav grimaced, "Mom, that's not a good topic." Morgan wrote in her notebook, "We have a great team and a nice boss." Angelica replied, "God willing, that's true." Yaroslav only reddened, not sharing the difficulties with colleagues, but his mother noticed the bad mood he often came home with. "It's good you met each other." "Yarek seems to have changed around you, Morgan," Angelica said. "Mom, stop," Yaroslav blushed. Morgan wrote, "Your son is a very good person and has helped me a lot," and showed it to Angelica. "Oh, kids. I hope everything works out for you," Angelica said, holding their hands. Morgan felt a warm glow in her chest from Angelica's smile, seeing such love and understanding in Yarek's home. She understood why her beloved had grown into such a good person. "Forgive me for asking, but Yaroslav mentioned you grew up in an orphanage." Angelica said cautiously. "My parents died when I was very young," Morgan wrote. Angelica shook her head, "Sorry to bring it up. I just want to say you're always welcome here. I'll accept you as my own daughter." Morgan hugged Angelica, feeling full acceptance and understanding for the first time in her life. They continued their leisurely conversation, not wanting to leave such a cozy home, but work awaited the next day. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I promise to visit more often," Morgan wrote. "Thank you, son." Walked the young lady home. Angelica smiled. Outside, the evening air was fresh, and Yaroslav helped Morgan with her coat. "I'm glad we met," Morgan wrote. "You're the best thing that's happened to me." Yaroslav replied softly. Their faces close, Morgan closed her eyes, leaned forward, and kissed Yaroslav. Days passed, their love growing stronger, and they stopped hiding their feelings, even at the office. "Can you believe it? There's a mole in the office," Yaroslav told Morgan during lunch. "Someone's leaking important information to competitors, causing huge losses," Morgan wrote, concerned. "The director even involved security. They're searching every floor, checking computers, even our internal network and messages," Yaroslav added. Morgan was relieved she wasn't involved in this chaos as a simple technician. Suddenly, a stern voice called out, "You there, come here." Two men in black jackets approached Yaroslav. "Good day, I'm Konstantin from Internal Security. We found data transmission of interesting content on your computer," Konstantin said. "No, it's not me," Yaroslav exclaimed in panic. "Take him to my office," Konstantin ordered. Morgan, frozen in fear, watched them take Yaroslav away, her heart filling with dread. "This can't be true. Yarek is a good person," she wrote, showing Konstantin. "We're just following procedure. We'll sort this out," Konstantin replied politely before following his assistants. A scandal erupted in the office. The company's director, Fyodor Petrovich, known for his tough character, was ready to punish Yaroslav. "Believe me, it's not me. Why would I steal anything?" Yaroslav pleaded. As Yaroslav stood before the director, Fyodor Petrovich, he repeated insistently, "I didn't do it." Petrovich, unconvinced, demanded an explanation for the incriminating data and correspondence found on Yaroslav's computer. Konstantin, also present, stated firmly that after thorough checks, they believed the transmission of critical files was conducted from Yaroslav's workstation. Yaroslav, bewildered, protested, "I'm just an intern, how could I have access to such important things?" But Petrovich was dismissive, convinced of Yaroslav's guilt given the apparent evidence. He insisted on compensation for the company's losses or threatened police involvement, which would turn the situation into a criminal case. As Yaroslav struggled to comprehend the gravity of his situation, Morgan waited anxiously outside. Upon his exit, Yaroslav's demeanor was one of deep worry and despair. Morgan immediately approached him, writing in her notebook, "Why are they accusing you of this crime? You're innocent." "I don't understand either," Yaroslav replied, shaking his head. "I've never even used a flash drive to copy data, let alone steal anything." He felt utterly powerless and betrayed, realizing the severity of the situation and the impact on his sick mother, for whom he was the sole provider. Morgan held Yaroslav's hands, her eyes imploring him not to give up. Despite his weak smile and gratitude for her support, Yaroslav was visibly shaken. "Give me some time, and we will prove my innocence," he assured her. A few days later, they were in an improvised smoking area when Maxim entered, followed by an unknown man. They discussed a successful operation, with Maxim referring to Yaroslav as a dupe who was conveniently blamed for their scheme. Morgan overheard them boasting about how they had manipulated the situation and planned to profit from their plot. Enraged by their callousness and realizing the gravity of the conspiracy, Morgan decided she had to act. She followed them, determined to uncover the truth and save Yaroslav from the false accusations that threatened to ruin his life. Her resolve was firm. She knew she had to expose the real culprits to save both Yaroslav and the company they worked for. As Yaroslav stood before the director, Fyodor Petrovich, he kept repeating his innocence. Petrovich, however, was unconvinced, demanding an explanation for the data and correspondence found on Yaroslav's computer. Konstantin, also present, intervened, stating that the transmission of critical files was indeed conducted from Yaroslav's workstation. Yaroslav protested his innocence, but his words fell on deaf ears. Morgan, in a moment of desperation and knowing the truth, decided to act. She caused a distraction by throwing a bucket of water and a mop at the feet of Oleg Lvovich, a representative from the other company. The act caused chaos and effectively halted the negotiations. As a result, Oleg Lvovich, offended and suspicious, decided to withdraw from the deal. Fyodor Petrovich was furious and demanded Morgan be brought to his office. As she stood before him, trembling, Petrovich berated her for her rash actions. But in a surprising turn of events, Morgan, who had been mute for years, found her voice in the stress of the moment. She revealed that Maxim had conspired to sabotage the deal and frame Yaroslav. At first, Petrovich was skeptical but, realizing Morgan wouldn't have acted so drastically without a serious reason, decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Further investigation revealed that Maxim and his accomplice, the unknown man Morgan had overheard in the smoking area, were indeed the culprits. They were apprehended and brought before Petrovich, who confronted them about their treachery. Evidence and witnesses, found by Konstantin, confirmed their guilt. Maxim, faced with undeniable proof, was held accountable for his actions and the damages caused to the company. Morgan's brave act not only saved Yaroslav from an unjust accusation but also exposed a significant conspiracy within the company, preserving its integrity and future. Her unexpected recovery of speech and her courage in facing the challenges head-on changed the course of events, proving that sometimes, the most unlikely people can make the biggest difference. Maxim, cornered and defeated, bitterly acknowledged his downfall, realizing it was time to face the consequences of his crimes. After the exposure of the conspiracy, the company's fortunes began to rise again. Fyodor Petrovich successfully secured a lucrative deal, ensuring a prosperous future for the company and its employees. At a company gathering to celebrate the end of the quarter, Fyodor Petrovich, amidst decorations and festivity, handed out traditional bonuses. He also took a moment to apologize for his past harshness and lack of attention, especially to Morgan, inviting her on stage. Overwhelmed with pride and joy for the role she played in resolving the company's crisis, Morgan, her voice still tentative, expressed her gratitude for the warm reception in her new life. Fyodor Petrovich then turned to Yaroslav, apologizing for the unjust treatment he had received. Yaroslav, sitting next to Morgan, was officially congratulated for completing his internship and offered a managerial position in recognition of his dedication and achievements. As the ceremony returned to its usual format, Yaroslav and Morgan reflected on the tumultuous events and their happy resolution. Yaroslav, marveling at Morgan's regained voice, praised its beauty. She was still adjusting to this new aspect of her life. Just as Yaroslav announced he had something to ask her, pulling out a velvet box from his pocket, Yaroslav revealed an elegant ring and proposed to Morgan. Overwhelmed with happiness, Morgan accepted, feeling her life had finally turned a corner for the better. The couple, having weathered many trials, knew they could face whatever challenges life might bring next. Yaroslav casually inquired about Morgan's future plans, to which she revealed her intentions to pursue distance learning in management, aspiring to work alongside him. Delighted, Yaroslav leaned in to whisper something to her, which she didn't initially understand. But then, seeing the engagement ring, she realized his intention and joyfully accepted his proposal. Their journey, filled with adversity and triumph, had led them to a moment of true happiness. Morgan, once tested by fate, now felt genuinely content and ready to embark on a new chapter of her life with Yaroslav.